uses as a way to succeed. Flamboyant, boisterous. I just can't think of too many other terms. I had a chance to meet him for the first time tonight. We talked on the drive. I think you'll enjoy him. And in fact, even if you hate him or love him, the opposition has to acknowledge that he has been a singular force for limiting taxes in Washington State over the past 20 years. Welcome with me, Mr.
Hey, thank you very much, man. That's awesome. All this love, I'm just so used to it. It just happens all the time, everywhere I go. Let me see. Well, while I've got you, we send out an email update to our supporters. It goes out just 2 times a week. How many people in here already get those? Handful. If you guys are up for it, put your email address on here and I'll sign you up for them. They go out just 2 times a week, nothing too overwhelming, but they're really informative. They really let you know kind of what we're up to. And the one this morning I was really proud of. Anybody know the Uncle Sam signs? The sign that's down on Southwest Washington. It's pretty iconic. It's been there for like 50 years, conservative messages. The guy who runs that contacted me about 2 weeks ago or so and said, I want to promote your $30 car tabs initiative. And I'm like just falling all over myself, just honored by it. It's like, my gosh, to do something conservative and to earn a place on the Uncle Sam sign, but on the sign it says Tim Eyman's $30 tabs initiative. And I'm just like, oh, I got nowhere to go but down now because, boy, I've reached the pinnacle, It was really, really extraordinary. So that was the update this morning, just highlighting the fact that it's going really well. There's a business that's right next to the sign, and it says sign petitions here, and people are pulling in and signing. So it's just a really, really neat thing. So the email updates, just as you pass that around, make sure everybody has a chance to sign on to those. Then I gave everybody a handout. Did anybody not get this handout? Because I'm going to be talking about it quite a bit. Looks like that gentleman there. Who wants to help me? Anybody will do. Thank you. A couple more. So I had a really nice dinner with the leaders of the organization. We had a really, really good time. I've known Sandy and Jay Dahlquist for many, many years. I was asking Jay, does it go back to $6.95, $30 tabs? Did we actually go back that far? And he goes, yeah, I think it was. So we've had a lot of friends over the years, and it's just a really good group. And I was born and raised in Yakima, east side of the state. I don't know if you feel this way as well, but every place outside of Seattle, people just get a little smarter, a little more sane. So my upbringing in Yakima, I always felt like gives you a good horse sense of where people are coming from. But I live in Mukilteo now with my wife and my 3 kids, and but growing up in Yakima, I think really did help me because Yakima's kind of the underdog in our state. And I think that underdog aspect really kind of took hold. I graduated from high school, went to Wazoo, and Wazoo, WSU, I think is kind of the underdog. UW is always assumed to beat them. But the Wazoo experience taught me again, the underdog. You always kind of pull for the underdog. And so when it comes to our initiatives, I think it's the same thing, very much the underdog. And so I kind of feel I'm going to be 52 next month. I mean, for the 20 years we've been doing these initiatives, it's always been an underdog fight. No matter what issue we're promoting, it always seems like we're the underdog. And the thing that's really fun about the initiatives that we've done over the years is that they do have a common theme. We've done lots of different topics and everything, but they're all about limiting government power. Government has a lot of power, and we want to put some limits on it. So it's kind of fun to go through memory lane a little bit. I'll refer to the sheet a little bit, but the first initiative I was ever involved with where I sponsored it was Initiative 200. And that was banning, essentially government-sponsored affirmative action. I think it's really important when you try something for the first time that you start with something kind of easy and work your way up. And so let's just go ahead and take on affirmative action. It's the first one that I was ever involved with. But that initiative, I was like an abysmal failure. We spent like 9 months trying to organize it, trying to put it together, and we were failing. And we went to a guy named John Carlson, who is a talk radio show host who had done quite a few initiatives in the 90s, and we begged him to take this initiative campaign over. And he did, and carried it over the finish line, and that initiative passed by a huge margin. But it really was my first experience, and I was just a total failure. So the following year, we did an initiative that was 691 that sought to lower car tax in our state. And that initiative, we ended up working for 6-7 months, and we fell short. So we failed again. And then in 1999, we did Initiative 695 that did $30 car tabs and voter approval for every tax and fee increase in our state. And that thing just took off like a rocket. It was just incredibly popular, very well thought of by the public. The public voted for it. And then a month or two later, the court struck it down. It said voters were confused. They didn't understand what they had voted for, so we're going to strike this thing down. So that experience taught me something really quickly. Was that same day, the day the judge said that the voters didn't know what they were doing, Governor Gary Locke, a Democrat, held a press conference, and he said, regardless of the court's ruling, $30 license tabs are here to stay. And within a week, the legislature swooped in and adopted the $30 tabs. And what that taught me is that even though we had failed, the vote itself had a tremendous lobbying effect on the legislature, and we ended up getting the policy anyway. And so even though some would classify it as a failure, I'd say it's probably one of the most spectacular failures we've ever had, because over the last 16 years, the taxpayers have saved on lower car tabs about $24 billion over the last 18 years from our failure. So that's all. You don't need to clap. That's although I appreciate it. So the next year we did an initiative to cap the growth of property taxes. And we put a 2% limit on property taxes that year, and that initiative passed. And then a judge said, you know what, we just don't think voters knew what they were doing. They were confused again, and they struck that one down. And so we did a follow-up initiative the following year and said, okay, you dirty dogs, if you don't like 2%, well, we're going to do a 1% limit. We're going to tighten the belt even tighter the next time. And that initiative ended up passing by an even wider margin than the 2% limit did. And then they didn't challenge it in court. They just stepped back. And what I think that they realized was, he started at 2, we fought him, the voters came back with 1%, tightened the belt even tighter, they went by a wider margin. Jiminy Christmas, maybe we better call it a day, walk away from it. So that again taught me that the importance of politics is persistence. It's coming back again and again and again. That's probably the thing that we have the toughest, I think, as conservatives and libertarians, is we're looking for the permanent solution. We want something, what's going to solve the problem? Yeah. What's the solution to the problem? And the reality is government, there is no solutions. It is a tug of war that we're constantly in, where the other side is always pulling the rope in favor of higher taxes, higher spending. They are relentless. No matter how much they take, they want more. That you end up giving them a little bit, they ask for more. There's literally never a point where they say, thank you, we have enough, thanks for your time, they move on. They're relentless. And so at least the way I've always viewed our 18 years of activism is we need to let the voters help pull the process in the opposite direction, in favor of more limits on taxes, on more restraint by government, by being a little bit smarter. Because if it's really easy to raise taxes, they're going to do it all the time. So you want to make it tougher for them. So the following year we did an initiative on $30 car tabs again. We noticed they started going back up again. And to me, $30 tabs reminds me of like mowing the lawn. You mow the lawn and you say, God, look at how good this looks. We got it down to $30. And then it starts growing back. And then you got to mow it again. And I heard some supporters say, Jiminy Christmas, man, we did this. Didn't we do this already? He said, we've actually done it twice already. Why do we have to do it again? Because when the grass grows back, you have a choice. You either mow it again, or it's just going to keep growing over your head. And the idea behind citizen initiatives, at least in my view, is the government wants you to quit. They want you to give up. They want you to get cynical. They want you to say you can't beat City Hall. And I have this wonderful supporter, Jerry Gibbs. He's a big activist in Pierce County. He had this great metaphor. He said, the barroom brawl is not over until you stop swinging. And it's really true. As long as you're swinging, as long as you're in the game, the fight's not over. And I think that the idea of 18 years of doing initiatives on so many different topics, half the battle is just surviving it, just continually getting back up. Even when they knock you down, you got to stand back up again, and you say, you know what, we're going to try something different this year. We're going to learn from the previous year's experiences and move forward from there. And that's the challenge that we always have, is whenever you're doing these initiatives, the challenge is always, all of us are looking, well, wait a minute, okay, are we done yet? And it's like, no, you're never done. Every year, down in Olympia, there are groups that their sole purpose is to lobby our elected officials to raise taxes, raise fees, and the system is so rigged. I go down to Olympia all the time to testify on the various bills and everything, and for some reason they schedule these hearings at 10 in the morning on a weekday, 1 in the afternoon on a weekday. Now, for some reason, all of us have a disadvantage the Democrats don't have to worry about. We all work for a living. We don't have time to go down to Olympia in the middle of the day, driving 2-3 hours down there, sit in a hearing for about 2 hours, and then be told you've got 60 seconds to say your piece, and then you take 3 or 4 hours to drive back with bad traffic. Normal human beings, you know, do not do such things. They don't waste their time with that kind of idea. And the government understands this, and this is why they have these kind of hearings and when they schedule them when they do. When I go down there, when they were pushing, what was it, I think it was a capital gains income tax, 172 people testified they should do this. Me and another guy were the only ones who were against it. And they were like, well, geez, obviously the public wants this. And I'm like, no, there's only 2 freaks of nature that actually spent the time to go down there, me and this other guy. Everybody else, the 172 that were testifying in favor of it, literally had nothing else to do. That was their job. They were the ones who were going to get the money. So of course they're going to show up. So the challenge that we always have is every year it keeps going. This very nice woman, Ellen? Ellen left the state for 6 years, came back and said, thank goodness Tim's still in the game, you know. So he's still around, he's still fighting. And so the initiative process is an ongoing fight. And I understand this, and I understand as conservatives, as libertarians, we only have about this much of our attention span spectrum to put toward politics. Because we're normal. We're normal human beings. We care about our families more than we care about politics. We care more about going to church and being faithful to our God than doing politics. We feel more better about going to see our kids' soccer game than showing up at some meeting on a Saturday afternoon. This is normal. I'm not. I'm a freak of nature. I love politics. It's something that I live and breathe every single day. It's not what I have planned for myself. I got a business degree from Wazoo. I was always very entrepreneurial growing up. I assumed I'd start some company and run a business or whatever. But for whatever reason, in my mid-30s, this just took over my life. And it's really fun. It's extraordinarily fun. And I think the reason I've always been drawn to it is normal people would never do it. So therefore, let's do that. That sounds interesting. That sounds more challenging. And when we do our initiatives, the attacks that we get are just like a badge of honor. It's just the greatest feeling in the world, you know. One of the greatest compliments I ever got was Governor Inslee was at a press conference, and they were talking about taxes, and they said, well, you know, hey, Tim, I was thinking of maybe doing an initiative on that. And it was so funny. The body language was just magnificent. He's a real tall guy, and his nose went higher. He looked down, he said, I do not answer questions about that man. Next question. I was like Voldemort from Harry Potter, you know, the name you shall not say, you know. It was such a great compliment, you know, to know that I was so under his skin that he could not even bring himself to answer the question. He could have said, you know, hey, he's got the right to oppose it. It's perfectly fine. That's the part of our system. Could have just blown it off. But it stuck in his craw so much that he was even asked the question. It was unseemly. He felt dirty just by even asking the question. But really, what am I? I'm just a metaphor for what the voters are. It's just the people. I mean, that's all our initiatives are about, is letting the voters vote on issues that we think the voters are interested in. So whether it's car tabs or property taxes or whatever the initiative is, we're saying on this issue, we think the voters should have a chance to vote on. That's all it is. The resentment you get from the opposition is they think the majority of voters agree with us. If they thought the voters weren't on our side, they wouldn't care. They would know that the voters are going to go against it. So, hey, good for him. Let him just shoot his mouth off and push for this stuff. They're going to pass. Why should that even matter? And so that's the delicious part when you're doing initiatives, is that you know ultimately it doesn't matter what I say about it. Voters are going to make up their own minds. But qualifying initiatives for the ballot is astronomically difficult. Over the last 18 years, we've gotten 16 initiatives on the ballot. We try and do like one a year. So we're not batting 1,000, but by and large, we're pretty successful at getting them qualified for the ballot. And unfortunately, sometimes that makes our supporters a little bit too overconfident. That, oh, well, geez, this is an incredibly popular initiative that Eyman's doing. He's doing this $30 tabs again. Everybody I talk to is really upset about their car tabs. This one's going to be easy. This one's going to be simple. And besides, he normally qualifies the ballot, so I'll sign it, but that's pretty much it. And the important thing is you've got to get involved. You've got to be willing to write a check. You've got to be willing to walk out of here with petitions and get out there and help us, because I can't do it alone. I can put ideas out there, but they never qualify for the ballot because they say something clever. The only reason is really nice people like Jay and Sandy and all the people that donate to our initiatives are willing to say, you know what, I don't have time to do politics. Let me help Eyman's group do it for us. And so with all the initiatives that we've ever done, it's not because of anything I did, it's because voters said, you know what, I agree with them on this. This is really cool. And frankly, it reminds me of, what's that Christmas story? It's going to be coming out soon. It's a Wonderful Life. George Bailey, the Jimmy Stewart character. It's that feeling that you have at the end of the movie where he's in trouble and people kind of swarm to help the guy out. Say, hey, George, I heard you got some problems. And people come out of the woodwork. That's the way it was with $30 tabs when we first did it. People just came out of the woodwork. People I didn't even know who they were, and they wouldn't even call me first. They would just start sending in donations for this initiative. And it's because at the end of the day, you know, they realize that this is probably one of the only ways we have to effectively fight back. The legislative process is really rigged. I mean, it's really working against us. It's not that voters are uber liberal. It's just that in Seattle, a huge population center, they have disproportionate amount of power, and Olympia essentially works for what's going to make Seattle happen. But when you do a statewide initiative, you're letting everybody in the state have a voice. Those rational people in Yakima, those normal people in Spokane, those really cool people in Chelan, those people in Mukilteo, even Whatcom County, even in Southwest Washington. Pretty normal people. There's more of us than there are the crazies in Seattle. They have a disproportionate impact on the legislative process, but on the initiative process, our initiatives, what is it, out of 16 initiatives, either 10 or 11 have passed. So pretty good win-loss record that we've got. And every initiative is its own thing. So right now we're working on $30 car tabs. Is there anybody who hasn't signed the petition yet? Oh, I love you all. God, you're awesome. You in the back! I'm coming after him. I love you, man. Sign that bad boy. So I won't go through the rest of the initiatives because they're right in front of you. One of the reasons I wanted to give you this handout is at the bottom has all my personal contact information on it. Call me anytime, email me anytime. This is what I do full time. I just non-stop do political stuff, and sometimes it's hard to ask questions in front of a bunch of people. Shoot me an email, make a phone call me up. So for a little while, and then eventually we'll talk about how the AG is seeking to sue me and take away my political rights for the rest of my life. So that's kind of fun. How do you want to start?
We got a small enough crowd tonight, so if you have a question,
Yeah, just yell.
raise your hand. I'll bring you the mic.
You just yell out. I mean, I'll hear you.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Can you hear me okay?
Absolutely.
Tim, we met at the Gary Johnson rally in Seattle. Thank you for coming to that. I'm a former city councilman in Bremerton. I'm a former Democrat. And your name is used very widely in Democratic Party functions. You know, you are the lightning rod. So congratulations.
Yeah, there you go.
But anyway, through my 7 years of government service as a council member, I saw the growth of government, saw the increasing tax burden on our citizens in Bremerton. And when I got elected, and I promised a voter that I would try to legalize chickens here in Bremerton. We actually started gathering signatures, and we threatened the council so much that they actually legalized provisionally the keeping of chickens in Bremerton. There's certain rules to that. I actually wrote the ordinance and all that stuff. But so that's a way, as Tim, you mentioned, that's the way to influence policy. But the other concern I have here in the state of Washington and in Bremerton is there are utility taxes that Bremerton imposes on its own utilities. It's a way of transferring, collecting money, revenue for our general fund and street fund without telling our utility ratepayers. So if you live in Bremerton or on the outskirts of Bremerton and get utilities from the city, you are subsidizing the city's general fund and you don't know it, and it's not on your bill. So my question to you, Tim, is when are you going to launch this initiative to limit municipal utility taxes against their own utilities?
And you said it's really profitable for cities. I mean, it generates ridiculous amounts of money.
Around $7 million for Bremerton for 2018 is what's budgeted. 20% on sewer, 20% on stormwater, 15.5% on water. Those are the tax rates. And those are rolled into the utility rates. You don't see them. It's all, so anyway.
You mentioned the Gary Johnson rally. I just want to be clear about this. Is for me, politics is like normal people would think of Woodstock. You know, that hey, I'm going to go to a concert. I'm going to see all the people. You know, for me, I went to the Gary Johnson rally in downtown Seattle, the Libertarian candidate running for president. I went to the Hillary Clinton rally, and it was at a Union Hall up in Everett. Real snoozer, by the way. I went to the Bernie Sanders rally. Talk about the skunk at the party. It was so much fun. It was really awesome. It was downtown Seattle, Key Arena. I mean, absolute nut jobs all over the place. But for me, this was fantastic. I mean, everyone's into politics. This is super. I mean, it's not my value system. It's not where I'm coming from. But I love the energy. I went to the Trump rally, of course, in Everett. Yeehaw is right. So much fun. And really, I loved just watching the protesters. It was just hilarious, you know, just how worked up they were about the guy. I mean, the more they hate him, the more I love him. I mean, that's just the reality of it, you know, and I somewhat identify with the concept. The more you hate him, the more you like him. And there was something about all these rallies that really struck me as important, is that politics is really important. I mean, it really is. I mean, I kind of denigrate it by saying we have other priorities in our lives, but that just makes us normal. But it is really critically important, and I think that it is important that we realize that the other side believes in what they're doing also. And it doesn't make them bad people. It's just the reality is that we just need to work harder to get our ideas on the agenda and pushed forward, because they're always going to be pushing their ideas. That doesn't make them bad people for pushing their ideas. This is what they believe in. So I think that politics, and if you remember nothing else, everything I say the entire night is politics is a tug of war. It is a tug of war. They are always going to be pulling the rope in their direction. This 45th district race that we lost in November means the Democrats can now control the House, the Senate, and the governorship, and they're going to be pushing their stuff really, really hard. If we had won, we would have done the exact same thing. So the reality is the tug of war got a little tougher. They pulled the rope really hard. It wasn't that suddenly the people of the state of Washington just suddenly said, hey, here's my checkbook, take all my money. One race in one district went against us. Didn't change our minds about our feeling on taxes, on car tabs or anything, but it made the tug of war a whole lot tougher for us. So what that means is, it doesn't mean that you turtle up, go home and say, you know what, you can't beat City Hall. It means, you know, we need to work harder. We need to work even harder. And so showing up in Olympia and the email updates that I send you, one of the things that I was really proud of that we came up with in recent years is we have a list of all the email addresses for every single legislator. And we make it really easy for everyone to say, send this email to all 98 members of the House. Here's an email, send it to all 47 senators, and you can send it to all of them. And we give a suggested text, but we always say use your own words. And visualize having 147 people in a room and you have a chance to talk to all of them. And what would you say? We have some supporters that are so profane, and I love every one of them, but they take on these 147 people and they express themselves very viscerally. And I think that's good. That's free speech. Let them go. Some of our supporters are more restrained, but the important thing is we try and target particular things. There's a bill that's this Thursday. Here's every legislator's email address. Send them an email saying you think House Bill 2900 is bad and tell them why. And now you would think, you know, sometimes we get cynical. We say, well, they're not going to react to this. That's not. And that's where numbers come in. When you get, you know, I send out an email to 20 or 30,000 people or whatever, and 2 or 3 or 4 or 500 people all send an email saying this bill is really bad, the reality is that has an impact in Olympia. They have a trouble ignoring that. And frankly, the good guys, our guys, need to hear that kind of stuff. Republican Party isn't necessarily that strong in our state. Our elected officials are always thinking to themselves, oh geez, am I on the right side here? You reinforce them by communicating with them and telling them that, you know, that we're with you, that you're not alone, that there's more of us than there are of them. That's another thing that I think our initiatives really serve a very positive role in, is that if it was only for the 45th district race, you would think suddenly Democrats are in charge of everything, that everybody's in favor of higher taxes. But we had these advisory votes that were on the November ballot where the voters got to vote on all the tax increases that were passed this legislative session. And the voters repudiated all of them. One of them was like 65% no. The other one was 62% no. The other one was 56% no. Because of that public vote, voters now, the establishment looks at the electorate a little bit differently than they would have if we hadn't had those votes. If they only had the 45th district vote to base it on, they would say, well, geez, she slaughtered Jit Young England. She won 55-45. Voters are clearly in favor of a capital gains income tax because Montenegro said she was in favor of that, and voters voted for it. And it's like, no, it just maybe means that they didn't like the Republican. It doesn't mean that they necessarily liked Montenegro. It's just that the reality is races are about two competing people. I heard 1 million people say, you know, Trump versus Hillary. Did I love Trump? Not necessarily. I couldn't bring myself to possibly vote for Hillary. Didn't mean that you just thought Trump was the greatest thing there ever was. It's just that given the choice between the two, you know, it was, for me, it was a really easy choice. I also have the benefit of having such a low opinion of politicians and how little I can expect of them. I'm thinking, okay, is Trump going to be marginally better than Hillary? And I'm going, dramatically better. So when they say, well, he hasn't really done that much, I'm like, I didn't expect him to accomplish that much. I mean, the reality is the political process is really hard. And he's trying to drain the swamp, trying to do things, and I just look at the glasses half full. He did Neil Gorsuch. We've got a Supreme Court justice. Hillary would have named just a whack job for that position. We'd just be absolutely shafted for the next couple of decades. So I think it is helpful when you keep your expectations really low for politicians, because you know you'll never be disappointed. So anyway, with that, any other questions as I get into full ramble mode here? But politics is really fun. I mean, how many of you have been involved with politics all your life? Wow, good for you. How many are more in recent years, kind of getting into it? Okay, yeah. It's a fascinating process, and frankly, there's no real rules to it. I mean, it's really just, it's whatever it feels like happening, and it really gets challenging. I guess as good a time as any to talk about the Attorney General. The people at dinner asked me about it. I guess quite a few of you recently got a letter from me where I'm shaking the tin cup and asking for help, so let's talk about that for a while. Who was I talking to? One gentleman in the back. I think it was you, yes. First name again? Chuck. Chuck was mentioning, you're getting the crap kicked out of you. That must mean you must be doing something right. And I think that is kind of true in politics. If you're being criticized, you must be doing something right, because if they don't criticize the ineffective people, what's the point? So they go after. So I've got the Attorney General filed a lawsuit against me, and he's seeking $2.1 million and a lifetime ban on all future political activity. Now, you laugh because it is so insane. The rest of your life. I mean, when he was having the press conference down in Olympia, a reporter, one of the few that isn't totally in the tank, said, that second part, I got the 2.1 million. So how long is it that he's not from this point forward? And so for the rest of his life, yes, cannot be politically active the rest of his life. So it's really weird. It's really odd. But as I mentioned at dinner, when you're involved in a lawsuit, whether you're the plaintiff or the defendant, whether you're innocent or guilty, you've lost. Because these things are astronomically expensive. And Bob Ferguson understands that when you sue somebody, they've got a cloud over their heads, they got to lawyer up, they got to spend a tremendous amount of money defending themselves. They've got to, it's stressful, it's scary. It's, I've got a dinosaur skin over the last 18 years, but my wife is freaking out. Because Tim, we don't have 2.1 million. I don't know about you, but if you got money, in the backyard or something, but we don't have it. So what are we talking about here? And so it's a really scary thing. So it was a 2012 campaign that we were involved with. I made some money from doing it, paid my taxes on it, and all that. And my treasurer and everybody involved said, you don't need to report that on a campaign report. That's separate and apart from that. The Attorney General takes the position that no, that needed to be on a campaign report. So we disagree over whether or not me making money from politics needed to be on a campaign report or not. That's the disagreement. We acknowledged the fact, and in my first deposition when I was interviewed, they said, did you make this money? Yes, I did. Did you pay taxes on it? Yes, you did. Did you report it? Yes, I reported to the federal government. The treasurer said you didn't need to report it anywhere else. Oh, okay. Seemed like it was kind of over with at that point. And then they did the, kind of the full-on dumpster dive. So for 5 years, they were going through all my tax returns, and they went through all my bank statements, and they went through everything. And they were trying to find something. They were looking for everything. And then when he finally charged me, which was March, he has his press conference, and he ends up going forward with it. My attorney observed, okay, so the only thing he's challenging you on is what you admitted to in the deposition. He didn't find anything else. He goes, not everybody can go 5 years with everything being looked under a microscope and not finding anything else, so you should feel decent about that, Tim. And I said, I feel great. No, it was an awful experience. The only other thing he said is, Tim, I've got some clients that are facing the possibility of losing their liberty, going to jail. We're not talking about any of that. This is civil. This is, as bad as this is, you're only talking about money. You're not talking about loss of liberty. So these, I'm a glasses half full guy, and I was asking my attorney, give me some good news here, because this seems kind of awful. And he said, not going to jail, and all he got was what you already admitted to. So recently, we decided that he's suing me. It's only appropriate that we sue him back. And so it's called the counterclaims, countersuits. And so my attorney said, let's sue him for violation of your First Amendment rights, violation of your free speech rights, The fact that he's bringing this lawsuit and he's profiting from it. There's been a couple of news stories about the fact that he's suing Trump like every other day. He's got like 21 lawsuits, but at the same time he's fundraising for his re-election and elections. So he's raising close to $1 million from all these lawsuits that he's doing. And when he ran for re-election, he had a page on his website saying, hey, we're suing Tim Eyman. Give me a bunch of money so that you can... So one of the counterclaims is what's called unclean hands. You know, you're doing this to personally profit off of the lawsuit. You're not supposed to do that. So the Attorney General's office walked into court and said to the judge, Judge, this is just insane. You need to penalize Mr. Eyman's lawyer because these counterclaims are just ridiculous. You know, this is insane. This is so inappropriate, wrong, and you shouldn't do this. And if these counterclaims stand, he's going to be deposed. And Mr. Eyman's lawyers are going to ask him questions, and that's just totally inappropriate. He's too busy. He's too important. You can't have such things. And the judge said, no, I'm going to allow the counterclaims to stand, and no, I'm not going to penalize his lawyer for raising the issues. These are valid. And so he upheld our counterclaims. And it was like the hit the shan at that point, because it was really an amazing thing. I wasn't there, but we have a supporter who's videotaping all the hearings, and so I had a chance to watch it. The lawyers for the AG were literally shaking. They were so upset. And it was like, what, didn't somebody pay this guy off? What's going on? We have actually an independent judge down here in Thurston County. This is crazy. Did somebody forget to pay him off? It was amazing. They did not expect it. And they stood up and said, now wait a minute here. Based on your ruling, we expect Mr. Eyman's lawyer to be asking any day now about deposing the Attorney General. Can you give us some kind of direction on how this is going to proceed? And the judge kind of looks confused. He goes, well, there's no motion before me. What do you want me to do? And my attorney stood up and just cool as a cucumber ended up saying, well, yeah, I mean, in the next couple of weeks, I'm going to work with them, trying to find a mutually agreeable time for us to be able to do it. And the judge kind of looks up, well, there you go. There you go, get out, you know. And Mark's of the opinion, the thing that they were losing their mind over is they had to go tell their boss. We didn't win. And they're not used to this. Campaign finance allegations are always believed. The media says you are guilty until proven innocent. That's just the standard. They win every case. This time they lost, and they literally acted like they never lose. And so the reaction they had was just overwhelmingly negative. So my attorney was really excited. He was thinking this was really good. We got him on, we're going on offense now. We're going after him. We're going to do discovery. We're going to do videotape depositions. This is going to be great. And he's clearly enjoying this. He's going to keep doing this until it stops being fun. And it finally today stopped being fun. So I'm like feeling kind of good and everything. And then he drops the bomb. He goes, of course, given all this additional discovery and preparation and all the depositions and preparing for those, it's going to be more expensive. So I couldn't help but be snarky. I said, so by winning the motion, it cost me money. If I had lost, I would have saved money. Well, yeah, that's kind of it. In the long run, you're going to be better off. And I'm like, well, in the long run, I'm going to be dead. So that's really kind of an awful situation. So anyway, on the back of the handout that I gave you, it has a nice summary of that, and it, of course, it shakes the tin cup and asks you to consider donating, and it's got all the information on there. Address for me is on the back, but I told him at dinner, part of me hates talking about this lawsuit because, I mean, who cares? I mean, you're normal human beings, everybody's got a sob story. It kind of sucks, but it would be political malpractice for me not to bring it up because the costs that I'm dealing with here are so high, I literally have no choice but to ask for help. And so I've literally had over 1,200 people donate to my legal defense fund. And it's deeply moving if you think about it. I mean, you're feeling so alone and you feel this huge weight that you're carrying over your head. And you think to yourself, geez, this is so heavy. But imagine 1,200 people standing around me helping hold it up. It gets a lot lighter. So it's a very, very neat thing, and it's really gratifying that 1,200 people think that I must be okay guy. They're willing to help, and that's a really nice feeling. And so you've got a million priorities in your life. You've got causes that you believe in. There's people that believe in the rights, and you've got causes that you support. But I'm hoping that you would add this effort to that cause, that you would help me survive this thing. Because at least in my view, the ultimate revenge in this kind of case is just surviving. It's just getting through it and continuing to promote initiatives that we believe in. And so $30 tabs is what we're doing right now. And the thing that gives me enormous satisfaction is that I believe that what Ferguson wants is for me to solely focus on the lawsuit and forget about initiatives for a while until this is resolved. And it seemed critical to me to not give him that and to say, you know what, let me prove to you that all you did was kick the hornet's nest, that all you did was make people even more enthusiastic about this initiative that he's doing. And it's not slowing anything down, it's only speeding things up. And so, you know, like I said, everybody's got a sob story, but shaking a tin cup, unfortunately, has to be part of my shtick now, because raising, you know, what is it, $600,000 for my legal defense fund is how much I have to raise. We put in $250,000 from a second mortgage on our house to loan to the legal defense fund to get the ball rolling. And so raising that much money is just, it's insane. And as I told him at dinner, this is just shows you how sneaky and underhanded these guys are, is that my attorney lives in Bothell, which is kind of north King County. He has to drive down to Olympia to do these hearings. The AG's office has to drive 2 miles to get to the hearing. So last month, they dragged him down every Friday, 4 Fridays in a row, in order to be able to do all these motions, one after another after another. And he's driving back and forth, and in 1 month, we had $50,000 in legal expenses associated with the lawsuit. So you know what the goal is to personally bankrupt me and just make it where even if I'm innocent, even when it's all said and done, the dust settles, and the judge says, you know, yeah, you did wrong, it doesn't matter. Even if I'm exonerated at the end, everything that Tim did was perfectly fine and hunky-dory. Who was the gentleman that told me the story about how he had this whole case and we won? Oh, Scott. You had, he had this land use thing, and they brought this thing forward. You need to bring a lawsuit. He won, but in the process ended up having to pay the lawyers in order to go through the entire process. Bob Ferguson understands this. He understands. Yes, sir.
One of your countersuits provide a reward of financial dues to your lawyers on
damages to you.
Only if we prevail. Only if we prevail. So we're in an early stage of the process where all we're doing is discovery. And they're asking for another deposition, and they want to bring me in and interview me again. And so this is just a long, drawn-out slog. The court date is November 26th of 2018. So another year. This started in 2012. So this has been going on for 5 years, and it's going to keep on trucking, and it's just going to keep on going. And the only way it's even remotely possible that I can survive it is if people help me with my legal defense fund and be able to do that. So, so anyway, enough of my sob story. Let's move on to more interesting things. Next year's initiative. So this initiative, we have from now until the end of December to collect signatures. And we're working really hard on that. And we're really pushing and really doing everything we can. And I encourage you to help us collect signatures for this initiative in these final weeks. And frankly, we don't know if we're going to make it because unfortunately, everybody always turns in the signatures at the end. And we have until the end of December. And so it's only then that you know whether or not you made it. And so anecdotally, it's going great. I mean, the fairs have been just absolutely amazing. People have just been lining up to sign, but getting 350,000 signatures is just, it's brutally difficult. Really, really hard. And so you really got to work at it. But starting in January, we have an entire legislative session that we're up against. And this is where my mind kind of went. And I've been working on this thing for a couple of months on this. Moncadigra, the 45th District woman, said throughout the campaign, I'm not in favor of a state income tax. I'm in favor of a capital gains tax. Duplicity. I mean, absolute duplicity. A capital gains tax is an income tax. It's exactly the same thing, but she seemed to think there was a distinction between the two. I'm not for a statewide income tax. That's a non-starter. They keep saying I'm for that. I'm for a capital gains income tax, however. So that was the signal. That's kind of the direction they wanted to go. So then you have, how do you raise a lot of money in our state? And the reality is Sound Transit, Phase 3, kind of tapped out the sales tax, property tax, car tap taxes. Those are about as high as they can possibly get. So where else can they get a ton of money really, really fast? The last piece of the puzzle was 1 week after the election, the Supreme Court issued a new decree, a new ruling. And the ruling was your tax increases you did this last legislative session weren't enough. You need to raise taxes $1 billion next year in the 2018 legislative session. $1 billion. How do you come up with $1 billion in a short legislative session? It's only one way: an income tax, capital gains income tax. So for months, I've been kind of seeing how things were shaping up. And so the initiative is called We Don't Want an Income Tax. That's what it's called. This one's called Bring Back Our $30 Car Tabs. This one is We Don't Want an Income Tax. What this initiative does is it simply says the state government and no local government can impose any kind of income tax. Current law, or the Constitution, has kind of some language in it, some court interpretations that have said an income tax is unconstitutional. But the opposition keeps trying to make distinctions because there's this ambiguity. So our initiative would clarify things and make it 100% clear we don't want any kind of income tax in the state of Washington at the state level. And what that does is that we say, specifically in the initiative, we don't want an income tax on wages, we don't want an income tax on capital gains, we don't want an income tax on any kind of money that voters earn, so that any kind of income tax, any tax on income, we do not want it. We just want to make it illegal. There's already plenty of precedent in our state for banning certain taxes. There's no sales tax on food in our state. That's because the voters voted for an initiative that said, we don't want that. That's a particular tax we find to be anathema. We're against that. There's another law that was passed in 1993, not widely known, that said the government cannot tax the intangible property. You know, the value of your company, your goodwill, any of that kind of stuff. That is not possible to tax that. So there's plenty of precedents for making a tax illegal. So our initiative is rock solid at the state level. At the local level, there's already a law that said counties and cities cannot impose a tax on net income. And what Seattle City Council did about 4 weeks ago, or a couple months ago actually, they imposed a local tax on adjusted gross income. So they said, we're not violating that law because that law isn't very explicit. It says net income, but net income is never defined in current law. So they're in court right now trying to get this judge who's going to make a ruling in the next day or so, is are they violating this law? But everyone agrees it doesn't matter what this judge says, it's going to the Supreme Court. And so the question is, do we want to sit back and hope the Supreme Court's going to do the right thing? Not me. I'd rather take it to the voters and say to the voters, we want to have an initiative next year on the November 2018 ballot that says we don't want an income tax. We don't want an income tax at the state level. We don't want it at the county level. We don't want it at the city level. We don't want any local government to be able to do it either. And so the initiative is beautifully simple. It's really clean. It's one subject. It's just about banning one particular tax, an income tax. So that is the initiative we're going to do next year. And I think the timing could not be better because Monica Dingra won her race. I wish she hadn't. But the fact that she won it means that we should be a little bit more scared about this next legislative session. The Seattle effort to impose an income tax, they all say the only reason we're doing this is we're trying to get the court to change its mind and say that it's now constitutional to have an income tax in our state. I don't feel like betting that they're going to do the right thing. I'd rather say, okay, if you guys win, then It's constitutional. Doesn't mean we want it though. We can pass a law that says we don't want it. Just because it's constitutional doesn't mean that it makes it where the law can't prohibit it. And so this is the effort that we have next year. Any general thoughts on whether or not we're going in the right direction with that initiative? Yeah. Thumbs up. I love you all. All right. Who doesn't want it? Who doesn't like it? We'll burn you at the stake. But no, honestly, it is second only to, I would say, even $30 tax is second. You know, there is something about our culture in the state of Washington just hates the idea of an income tax. I think it's because we don't like the idea of the government being able to get in on knowing what our taxes are. It's none of their business. It's tough enough that the federal government wants to do it. Yeah, go back. And by the way, you're the first group that I announced that's the initiative we're going to do. So it's kind of a cool thing. Coming out party. I'm out of the closet. Not that kind, but.
I think it's great. And one of the important things about initiative is it also makes people more aware of the issue. But I am kind of concerned, having talked to lots of voters. I ran for office last year. More and more people are believing the message that no, our tax system in Washington is progressive. We need an income tax. And so are you aware of how much that's changing and how we, change that message?
It's a great question. You have a perception that that's resonating with people. I mean, you kind of said they're saying this a lot, and I don't disagree. They say it a lot. They're louder than we are, but I think their numbers are smaller. And the only way you can prove it is by getting enough signatures, getting it on the ballot, and letting the voters vote. Then the quiet voice counts just as much as the loud voice does. That the reality is there's a lot of influential people that want an income tax. I mean, there's a huge amount of people. The unions are just salivating at the chance of it because they realize that there's no other revenue source available to them. Sales tax kind of peaked out, property taxes, everyone's starting to get a squeal point. Car tax, people are squealing about that. They know that there's only one big Moby Dick white whale out there, and they've been pursuing it for decades. The income tax. That's our whale. We're going to land that whale finally. And to me, the way to fight against it is let's get it on the ballot and have the voters repudiate it and make it where it's all about the income tax, any kind of income tax. I think that really is the best way to really drive it into the ground and destroy it. Yeah.
Yeah, I suspect that the focus on capital gains is class warfare. I mean, the progressive movement looks at the wealthy millionaires or billionaires as people who don't deserve what they have, and we need to take that, and we need to distribute that, and we need to take care of homelessness and all these other issues or problems that government needs to take on, according to the progressives. So I think the focus on capital gains is just that, is to separate and divide people, and that's what the progressives are pushing. And that's going to solve all their problems, all of our societal problems. Just get that capital gains tax, right? So how do you suggest, Tim, that we combat that?
Well, what I think we've been doing is we wait for them to do something, and then we whack that mole. And then they pop up with a new one, and we whack that mole. And then they pop up with a new one, and we whack that mole. We're waiting for them to push their ideas. And that means we're always on defense. That's why you need to go on offense and say, rather than waiting for whatever kind of different one they're going to do, say, we're against all of them. We're not in favor of a capital gains income tax. We're not in favor of a capital income tax on poor people. We're not in favor of rich people, middle class people, any kind of income tax across the board. You can't come up with one that isn't barred by this particular initiative. United we stand, divided we fall is what counters the divide and conquer. That's what they do. They swoop in. The number they said is only 32,000 people are going to qualify for the capital gains tax. Only 32,000 people. You probably don't even know who these people are. So therefore, you have no problem imposing it on those guys over there. When you do an initiative that says, we don't want an income tax on any citizen in the state of Washington, including you, but not just you, but also those people over there, now we're all one big happy family. We're all fighting against something that we're all against. And that's the way you really win these fights. One story I will tell you, I was pretty proud of this one. In 2012, the year I had my supposed scandal that they were involved with, was probably one of the most successful years we ever had. And I think that that may be related to one another. We qualified an initiative for the ballot. It was Initiative 1185. It renewed the 2/3 requirement for the legislature to raise taxes. It got more votes than any initiative in Washington state history. It got 1.9 million votes. It got like more votes than Obama got. It got more votes than Inslee got. It was enormously popular. It qualified for the ballot largely because like some oil companies, some banks, and a couple of large industries helped us get it qualified for the ballot. Now, the opponents had just, their underwear just got in a bunch. It's like, oh my gosh, can you believe it? The wealthy are they're getting, Eyman's in the back pocket of the corporation. And they had this big hissy fit, but the average voter said to themselves, well, thank you. I didn't have the money to get that darn thing on the ballot, but this is a 2/3 requirement that makes it tougher for them to raise any tax. Not just a tax on the corporations, but a tax on me and you. And so when they tried to make it into a class warfare, you shouldn't support this initiative because the banks are in favor of it, everybody instead said, well, wait a minute, it doesn't protect taxes only on banks. It protects taxes on everybody, including me and you. We don't want an income tax is exactly the same thing. They want to go after those 32,000 people that they're going to target, and we're saying, no, there's 4 million people, I think it's 6 million people in our state, I think it's 4 million are probably taxpayers, but we want to protect all 4 million of us from an income tax, any kind of income tax. And I think that that is the only way you can really win these fights. If we sat back and let them raise this capital gains tax, we could go to the voters and say, overturn what they just got through passing, but then you're defending those 32,000 people. If you do an initiative that says we don't want any kind of income tax, you're defending them, but you're also defending me and you and everybody else. So united we stand, divided we fall. It's the only way we can ever win these fights. And this initiative, I really think it'll probably be the most important initiative we've ever done, because we'd be killing their God. We would be killing their God. I mean, honestly, it was, rambling story, but I'm pretty proud of this. In 2010, Bill Gates Sr. sponsored an initiative to create an income tax. And I went to the launch. I love being the skunk at the party. It's so much fun. So it was at a bar, and I said we should probably be having this in a church because you have to have that much faith to think that the voters are going to vote for an income tax. But we're in a bar, and so he goes up there, and I'm really kind of puffed up and feeling pretty good about myself. And I said, I'm going to have a devastating question to ask him after he does his presentation and stuff. And so I'm all ready, I'm all geared up and everything. And he does his song and dance, and he goes, we're doing this. Any questions? And the press goes first, rightly so. And my favorite reporter, Essex Porter from Cairo 7, asks the question that I was going to ask. And he said, and I loved it because it sounded better coming from him than it did from me. He goes, excuse me, Mr. Gates, you say that you're only going to impose it on these people at this income threshold. What's to stop the legislature from lowering that threshold and imposing it on everybody else? Devastating. Bill Gates Sr. said, I'd never do that. It was awesome. I mean, I don't know if he was purposely obtuse or just senile, but it was just this funny moment. They would never do that. And Essex is like, they do it all the time. Every initiative that's passed, they monkey with it, they tweak with it. Whatever happened to our $30 car tabs? I mean, everybody, all of us have had experiences where voters vote for an initiative and the legislature changes it later. They do it all the time. Bill Gates Sr., his response, they would never do that. They wouldn't do that. The voters voted. That's the end of it. I'm just like, what planet are you from? So I didn't get to ask my question, but I was thrilled that it got asked, and he just made the most insane response. They would never do that. So anyway, it's I think that effort was really heroic. They ran a no campaign, and they got the voters to vote no. But they voted no on that one. That's why Seattle City Council came back and said, oh, we're doing a different one than that one. We want to do a blanket prohibition on any kind of income tax across the board. I think that's the only way you can really drive that stake into its heart and make it die forever. I can't guarantee that they wouldn't try later, but we would be able to say, voters just said creating a new one that's somehow more popular than the previous one. I think this whack-a-mole thing has gotten old, and I think we just need to have a blanket prohibition. So anyway, it's pretty cool. We don't want an income tax. Sir?
Hey, gentlemen, I have a mic here, so I'll say something.
Rock and roll.
Hey, you know, the income tax really is already being delved into the sales tax, because you've got sales tax being applied to labor.
Mm-hmm.
We don't do that in a lot of states.
True.
Plus, we've got Inslee's tax on bottled water, and prepared food is also taxed. I just bought a chicken, it cost me 45 cents for a chicken. Tax, sales tax. So what could we do to start picking apart this sales tax? It's 9% in this county, 10.2 in Seattle side, which is going out whack.
I honestly thought, you know, I remember 8.2%. I don't know how old everybody is in here, but I remember 8.2 being our sales tax. You know, 6.5 at the state level, and at the local level, it's about 8.2. And I said to myself back then, it's never going to go above 10. There's no way. I mean, 10 is it. That's just it. My city of Mukilteo just went to 10.4. It's the highest in the nation. My hometown, bears to say. I wrote the no argument in the voters pamphlet, and the voters ended up voting for it. So it was mad. And they said, just a little increase. It's the price of a cup of coffee. I mean, they're so good at that kind of stuff. And so the sales tax is insidious. It sneaks up on you. It's a massive revenue source. And even the left says, oh, it's regressive, it's horrible. Let's raise it again. I mean, they are so hypocritical. I mean, they want the money. I mean, it's all about the money. And so the sales tax is a hard one. It's a really hard one to go after, because even a small decrease is just an insane amount of money that the government loses when you do that. And so and you can see the initiatives we've done over the years. Car tabs, people write a check. I think there's something about that experience makes it where it's easier for us to convince people that just look how high your car tabs are. And I never have to convince anybody to sign this petition. It's people know how high their car tabs are, and they remember, didn't we vote for that? I go, yeah, we actually voted for it twice, but we got to mow the lawn again. Property taxes, really, really awful. This is actually a really proud achievement. The 1% limit on property tax increases. Everyone's complaining about the property tax increases, and rightly so. I believe that property taxes shouldn't be going up so much. But if not for this initiative back in 2001, no matter what your amount that you went up, it could have been as high as 6 times higher over the last 16 years if we hadn't done that initiative. The law, the way it used to be, was the state could raise your property taxes 6%. And your county could raise it up to 6%. And the cities and the county and the fire districts and the library districts and the ports, and everybody got 6. And everybody always took 6. They didn't have to go to the maximum amount, but they always did. And all these 6s were compounding against each other. And it really, really went up high. When we did our initiative 1%, now it's the state can impose a 1% increase. The county can go 1%, the cities can go 1%, and the only way they can go above 1 is to get voter approval. And so that initiative, we've saved taxpayers with all our initiatives close to $36 billion. About $25 billion of that is from our car tabs initiatives. The other 10 was from over the last 18 years, 2001 through 2017, over the last 16 years is that 1% limit on property tax increases. It's kind of banked in there. You don't really see it as much. People only see the increase, but I always have to remind them, whatever the increase was, it could have been 6 times higher if it wasn't for that one. So it's a really good initiative. Governments don't like it at all, but we always say to them, you can go higher, just convince voters to vote for it. You know, that's the safety valve that was built into that law. And it's the exact same law today as it was back then. I mean, it's lasted that long, and they haven't monkeyed with that one. And I feel real proud about that. Any other hands? Where are we at? Yes, David.
I believe one of the sneaky things they're planning, because the governor's been talking about the climate tax. So the climate tax, even though it has nothing to do with climate, they're going to charge people a tax based on their carbon emissions. And the carbon emissions are going to be predetermined by a group of very smart people who know how to bunk with figures, right? So I came from California, and they already had this. This is why I know about it. And we all went to take a college-level class, and the engineers from Chevron in Houston took the class with us, because the guys at Chevron already knew that they were also going to be faced with having a carbon tax at some point, and they needed to educate their workforce now about what it was, how it worked. So California is very complicated, and I don't want to go into explaining to it, but it's a 4-tier system. So the first tier, it gets implemented first, and of course, those are all the things that everybody hates anyhow: oil and gas, nuclear power, energy companies. And then level 2 is everybody who has refrigeration. This would be everybody in agriculture, every grocery store, Costco, etc. Level 3 is everybody who has a computer. That's everybody with a law office and accounting office. And then level 4 is everybody else, and that's all humans. So they're going to implement it over like a 20-year period of time. And so, of course, it would never really be called an income tax. But just imagine how much money they're going to end up raising over taxing people for their carbon emissions, when nobody really even knows if you actually emit any carbons. I mean, you know, right? I mean, how are you really going to measure that on everything?
Now remember, the carbon tax was on the ballot. They had initiative 732, I think it was, and it was on the ballot. They said, well, we're going to raise taxes on polluters, and we're going to lower the sales tax a penny to offset it. And so that's what they called revenue neutral. It's revenue neutral. You know, we're only going to tax these guys, we're going to lower taxes on you. Many people, I was certainly one of them, thought, maybe I don't believe you. And the voters voted it down. But this again is a whack-a-mole, because they said, oh, well, voters said no to that particular proposal, but they didn't say no to a carbon tax per se. They voted against that proposal. We need to try again. And so they are going to try again. And Inslee wants it so bad. He's salivating. He's just falling all over himself. This is his God. Really, it is. But he wants the money more. And down in Olympia, Moncadingra, the Democrats, they aren't supporting the carbon tax. There's a segment of them that are willing to support it, but they just don't have the votes for it. The income tax, capital gains tax, that's where the money is. That's where they've got the most level support among the unions. And I think in 2018 anyway, the thought is the income tax is where we want to head them off at the pass. The carbon tax, I don't disagree with you that that it would be essentially the same thing as an income tax, and as far as an impact, but at least for right now, it seems like the legislature, at least the Democrats, don't have the votes to be able to bring that one forward, because a lot of real powerful industries, frankly, are fighting against it. Kind of interesting. Anybody else? Well, I love you all. You're awesome. Thanks for having me here. And honestly, the flyer, if you want to follow up tomorrow, give me a call, send me an email. I mean, I'm always available, and I really love this stuff. So people go, I don't want to interrupt, you know what? I mean, I'll be having a restaurant, and I'm talking with whoever, and somebody walks by and says, hey, I got a question for you, and I stand up, and I just start talking, you know. So, I mean, I live and breathe this stuff. I really enjoy it, so I encourage you to give me a call or send me an email. Who's got my clipboard with the email addresses? Okay. Then the young lady in the back, she's so gorgeous. And you have something to do. Love, affection.
Well, you can't leave when I say that.
Joy. Oh, I come close.
So, as everybody knows, we give a little token, and we're hopeful that this very fashionable pen that you also can have from the bling table, never pass up a moment, right? That you will create your next initiative using this Tea Party pen.
What a great
Was this a good presentation tonight? Let's have a standing ovation for Eyman.
Thank you all, man. This is awesome. We got more work to do, I guess, but
We have just a couple of things and then we'll close. I want to make a brief announcement. You've noticed that there were some faces missing from the board, and I want to take a moment to acknowledge them if we can. So, Don Taylor and Joanne Benzie have both retired from the board this year, and they've been with us from the beginning, since 2010. And so I hope you'll keep them in your thoughts. They're retired. They will be engaged on and off. They don't drive well at night anymore, but they have been a tremendous bulwark of conservatism and mentorship for us, and we really appreciate them. If you know them or you have the opportunity to reach out, I hope you will thank them for their service. There's another person that is present tonight that has decided to leave the board, but he's still going to hang out and help us whenever possible. And Tom, will you please come forward? You've got a microphone. You've got a microphone. So I just want to thank Tom. He's left the board. He's been a great operations guy. He sets up, he helps take down. He's been very helpful and great input at every board meeting. And I just want to thank you for being there. And thank you for serving. There will be a board meeting immediately after the close of this meeting that is open to the public as well, where we will elect our officers, the president and the vice president of the board for the following year. You're welcome to stay and observe. Are there any last minute? There is one last minute. Has anybody ever told you anything about these envelopes? Okay, I won't beat that one to death. But if you are kindly going to put something in this envelope, please fill out the back form, because if you don't fill out the back form,